Hello and welcome to today's episode of Mitten Backstage. I am joined today by composer, singer, stringed musician extraordinaire, Annika Socolofsky. Now, I met her years ago in the kind of shared contemporary chamber music space in Michigan. We didn't go to the same schools, but we, shared mutual friends in the contemporary classical sphere. And the Michigan music scene. And we, I think, last chatted in person for more than a few minutes at the 2016 Bang on a Can Summer Music Marathon. So it was great to catch up after all these years and, just to chat about her career, her last year, her move to a new state, a new environment, dealing with so many challenges living in Boulder, Colorado, and just all of the things that come with that, from, climate related issues to the pandemic, all of these things. But the through line of it all was the hope in people interacting with artists in artistic spaces. She had just come off of a festival in Utrecht, so she was riding that high, even if there was a little jet lag. So it was nice to catch up with her for today's episode. If you liked the conversation and want to support my podcasting efforts, you can head on over to patreon.com/DutcherSnedeker. There, you can get early access to all the podcast episodes, exclusive perks and merch, and more. You can also go to DutcherSnedeker.com to see everything else that I'm currently up to around the internet. And another way you can help support is by liking, following, sharing, all of those things that you normally do to interact with your favorite content creators. Feel free to throw some of those my way. It helps the algorithm push out my stuff to more people. It, helps you as a listener of the podcast to be informed whenever a new episode goes live. And I try to keep a fairly consistent schedule. So if you want to get in right when the scheduled podcast episode drops, following and subscribing, all those things will help you stay informed. All right, let's get right into today's conversation with Annika Socolofsky.
Well, cool. If this works for you, it works for me. I'm down.
Yeah, this works great.
Also, hi. Great to see you.
Yes, hello.
It's been a while.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I've seen you since like Bang on a Can. I don't know if you were at. I'm trying to think if you were at the Strange Beautiful Music Fest I played, I think in like 2018.
I don't think I was there that year, no.
Yeah. So it might have been, since then, like
damn
years.
Back in the day.
Back in the day, just fresh out of undergrad, and the world just opened up to me from eventually going to my master's. But
yeah, nice.
Yeah. How was you just got back from overseas? How was that?
I did. I'm still pretty jet lagged, to be honest. It was great. I had a great time. We were making a lot of music, and I haven't done that in a very long time. And I performed for the first time since February 2020.
Wow.
And I was really worried about it. I'd done some recording, but not any live performance. And I've been living at high altitude for the last year and a half, and I went and sung at below sea level in the Netherlands, and I felt like Wonder Woman. Like, I was singing these phrases and holding these notes that I wasn't even trying, and I was like, wow, I have so much power, and I can just I can sink into this. So it just felt effortless, and it was really nice. So it felt good. I had really great collaborators I was working with the Gaudeamus Festival, and it was a great time. Man, it's been so long since I felt that, and it was just this perpetual feeling of, right, I really love doing this. Which is a good feeling.
Yeah, it's been so interesting to because I've had work just gigging work in general since February after, like months of just being like, can we do like a backyard outdoor 20-person ticketed streamed event in the summer, maybe.
in Michigan in January.
Yeah. Can we set up a streaming setup in our basement that it translates to, it's like all these, we already make concessions as artists with like the venues we pick, or we happen to just be playing, and to then be like, is my house a venue? No. Okay, whose house is a venue?
Yeah, exactly. And it's so nice to be in those venue spaces too. It's just, there's an energy there, and like this anticipation. I mean, I love house concerts, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But if that's all you're doing, it's different, right? It just doesn't, like, I can appreciate the house concert atmosphere way more if I'm also doing like venues. Makes both better, I think.
Yeah. You need a healthy dose of like the intimate, like, all right, it's, people in my immediate sphere in my city or community, and then you need that, like, you're backstage and you're hearing the rumbling in the house and you're like, all right, it's like 10 minutes, like, all right, let's do this, like.
Totally.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So were you this festival, you were like, was it a thing you reached out to as like I'm going to try and book this thing, or were you invited as a composer, performer person, or how did that all work?
Yeah, so I applied to, they have, so the festival, Gaudeamus Muziekweek, is a festival specifically of contemporary music, and it's very wide, kind of loosely classically affiliated in terms of genre, but there's just tremendous spectrum from pop to performance art. And they have something each year, which is they're like, basically it's a competition for composers aged 35 and under. And I'd applied and was named a nominee along with 3 other composers, Gen Tanaka, Matthew Ricketts, and Jenny Beck. And so they brought all of us out there to essentially compete. So this was very like reality show TV in a way, but it really wasn't, because there was like no cattiness. Everyone was like super supportive and having a great time. It was just like all positive vibes. Like, would have made terrible TV because we got along so well and enjoyed each other's company so much. But yeah, we were each rehearsing 3 pieces of ours, 1 premiere and 2 older pieces that were performed at the festival. And for me, I performed on one of those pieces. I sang one of them. And then there was a jury that was coming to all of our performances and working with us throughout the week. And then ultimately, they named the award winner at the end of the whole thing, like the last thing of the entire festival. It was a very exhausting week. Yeah. So and then we all went home.
There you go. In and out, crazy week of like, going from, scattered things here and there to like, this is what I was doing a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. And I just feel so fulfilled. It's really like getting to make music and spend time with people again. I mean, the Netherlands has all sorts of vaccination requirements for concerts, and then very limited seating. So, it was pretty easy to social distance and feel pretty safe, but it definitely was weird, like, being in rooms with people and making music. But yeah, it's just a wonderful feeling, like just getting to do that. And I think that a lot of us, maybe musicians, had a bit of a crisis over this past winter of like, what do I even, like, why am I doing this? Do I actually enjoy it? It's so hard right now. And then any little taste of getting back to it, at least for me, has been just invigorating and really validating. Right, yeah, this is the right thing. Like, this makes me tick. It makes me so fulfilled. It makes me so happy. It's just like It's just flipping awesome.
Yeah, it's been I remember kind of the two moments I had reflecting, because it was nice doing a residency at this venue in downtown Grand Rapids, the Listening Room. They, were like, hey, it started with like, oh, we need, Valentine's Day music, and we're going to try like a dining room layout, and, it'll be like 50 people at capacity.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do some solo piano. And then they got approved for a budget for like, a trio. So I would just rotate like, oh, I want to play with these people alternating weeks, and then these people alternating weeks, like just,
Mhm.
switching around and getting to have that, like, that feeling of performing, you know having an audience there, and being like, oh yeah, this is like, it's dinner music, so some people were kind of, just not paying attention, which is fine. But the ones that engaged, it was like, oh yeah, this is what I missed about live audiences, where like somebody perks up like, oh, I know that song, or oh, what, how did you play Message in a Bottle? I was like, yeah, we
Yeah.
just threw it together for
Yeah.
those moments. And then a lot of my friends in, the West Michigan scene, a lot of us played the Smiling Acres Music Festival, which is a new festival out in Truefant, Michigan. Somebody opened up their big property, a bunch of, like, a big field with some trees, and built a cool stage, had it like pretty well organized, considering it was the first. I'm expecting like, does anyone work here, or is it just like show up and play? But they had, the festival infrastructure. And I just remember everyone I talked to that played was just, we all kind of took a second and were like, this is why we all like
Yeah.
play, the community that's
Mhm.
around here, the setting, like getting to, that excitement of getting to play, and then the cool down of getting to catch up with people that, normally you'd see a handful of times in the summer, and it's been, months since you've seen a lot of
Yeah.
the people.
Totally. And that energy feedback from the audience too, you feel that from them, and then you alter your performance in a way that has a little something more in it, and then they sense that, and then they sense that, and it's just this like feedback loop, right? And it's incredible. There's no feeling like that. I really missed it. I'm sure you did too.
Yeah, it definitely got, it gets me more motivated, because I've a lot of my gigs this summer have been wedding gigs. So
Hmm.
it's been an interesting like juxtaposition of like, oh, I get to see some people I haven't seen in a while, and even though we're playing covers, it's still nice to play with people.
Yeah.
And then juxtaposed with like, a lot of the weddings were just like, oh, these people were fine on the surface, like they clearly have the money to spend like 20 grand on a wedding, but
Yeah.
like, it's fine. It's just that juxtaposition of like, I don't want to resent a stranger, but I kind of am just looking at that like, man, it would have been nice to have like a little bit of it, like, not
Yeah.
just the CARES Act unemployment, and having that run out in December.
Hmm.
um
Totally.
yeah, because yeah, it's definitely a lot of, I pivoted a lot to like, doing more recording work, a lot more writing. I took like small, like, hey, $20, I'll write an album review and publish it to my website. And
Hmm.
then, all right, that's gas money. That's like goes towards the grocery bill. That
Yeah.
just trickling money here and there.
Yeah, that's
Um,
smart.
but I think the one thing that I was thinking about it earlier today, the thing that kind of kept me more grounded, especially this year, where yes, things opened up, but it was still oh, we don't, will we?
Yep.
No. And then now
Yeah.
with the fall, it's up in the air again.
Hmm.
Uh, I think the podcasting has been nice, because it's carving out time to not only catch up with people, but just have this like centering of like, oh, it's, here's another person that like I want to invest my time and energy into, and then here's a moment that's not, doom scrolling or comparative Instagram scrolling or
Yeah,
all those things that start with, oh, that's a cool artist, and then sometimes end with, I'm nothing.
yeah.
What have I done?
No, I hear you. I hear you. It's so hard, especially when all of our lives are online. Like that, we're so much more online, and so much of our lives are happening through Zoom or elsewhere. That it's so hard to just live your life without being constantly inundated with the way everyone else is living theirs. And I don't think the human species was meant to exist in that kind of scenario, right? So it's no wonder that it just sucks in every way.
Yeah, it's definitely like, seeing, like, I think recently, well, not think, I did recently delete my Facebook app off my phone.
I've done that too.
Yeah, because it got to a point where, like, the utility of having, a convenient way to share things, like, Creator Studio works fine, but I like using the desktop version because then I can type up things easier. And then on my desktop, I use the newsfeed eradicator plugin on Chrome.
Yeah,
So
I have that too.
Yeah, just so that I'm not immediately, like, scrolling and
Damn scrolling.
Yeah. So I also see people who took, more drastic steps of, like my friend Josh. I think you might have met him, Josh Dreyer, percussionist who went to Grand Valley, played in the
I
New
don't
Music
know.
Ensemble, maybe. But he like checked back into Facebook, and it was that moment of, like, oh yeah, like, I honestly didn't even think about him until I saw that post, and I'm like, that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
Because he's definitely one of those people I like catching up with, and we, he got the ball rolling on the West Michigan New Music Collective, which, we did a handful of shows before things shut down. But yeah, it's nice to, like, as things have opened back up in various capacities, or just being able to, like, travel to see people again has been a nice change of pace, instead of just, waving from the house or
Definitely. Yeah.
yeah. So it was, I guess, because your title is doctor, so you
Yeah.
do teach, and are involved at a university. I can't remember specifics, but I'm sure that's been an interesting roller coaster of, like, adapting and readjusting and all of that.
Yeah. So I teach at the University of Colorado Boulder, and I started under COVID last year. So my almost the entirety, like 96% of what I did in my first year was on Zoom and email. So that was hard. I had a lot of challenges that came with it, and I think it's similar to making music live, where I had this thought, like, I really don't enjoy this. This is not what am I doing? And since so the university has a vaccination requirement and a mask requirement, and we've been having in-person classes since mid-August. And I remember the end of the first week of school, I was like, oh yeah, this is fun. This is why I do this. I mean, my students are incredible, and really being in the room with them and having that sense of energy exchange was so powerful and so just enjoyable, honestly, and reminded me that I really like teaching, and it's really rewarding for me, and it's not just a way to make money. It was really nice. And so since I went to Utrecht for Gaudeamus, I am now back in Colorado as of 2 days ago, but I'm in quarantine, so I'm teaching on Zoom this week. And it's definitely some PTSD from last year, and fortunately I get a negative test this weekend and we'll be good to go next week, knock on wood. But it's it's I'm very thankful that it is a limited amount of time existing in the virtual realm again, because it's just so great to be in the room with the students, and that they're very enthusiastic. They ask the best questions, and it's just like making music. It's just good to be back.
Yeah, just getting to not have that kind of input delay almost when you're working online only, and it's like, oh, did everyone get my email? Did everyone read my email? Will everyone respond to my email?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll have saw it was sent, and then it'll get buried, and then they'll ask the day before something is like, oh, what was the email? Yeah, because my dad's a professor at Grand Valley, and I know he had been teaching part-time online for schools over the last few years, over the summer, of just picking up extra coursework. And so while he had experience of teaching online, and the subjects he teaches around marketing and sales and communication can translate a little bit better to organized online packages, I know he's much happier to be back in the classroom and getting to have those little anecdotal stories about students processing through things, and the community around a shared learning space. And it's way better than just YouTube or
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, there's no substitute for, regardless of your subject matter, there's no substitute for just the level of nuance and sensitivity that you can have when you're with someone in person. And composition, honestly, is so much easier to do online than vocal music, vocal performance, for instance. But even still, that's just, there's no substitute for being in person.
Yeah, because I thought about, friends of mine who are still, in their undergrad or doing their masters. They were talking about even something as simple as juries, and how, oh yeah, that, we don't have in person or, rotated in and out rooms. It's just, you do it all, you film it and edit it yourself, or you hire studio work or studio engineers to help. And I could see part of my brain went to man, that actually would be really cool, because I always hated doing juries, just the pressure I always felt to perform, and just that feeling of all right, the three people who know my career development the most are now going to analyze every note I play. Versus being able to rehearse a band, get a tune down, shed it like crazy, think of all the jazz school people, and then getting to not only record it for a jury, but now they've made content, they've learned how to video edit and do audio engineering.
It's very important.
Yeah, which I see those tiny little positives of people having to adapt, but the majority of people I've talked to, obviously they're oh yeah, I love being back in jam spaces. I love getting to, see people on the road, or, just get out of my house overall. It's been an interesting time. Did you, I'm thinking about, last year, did you have those moments of I don't know, with personal stuff? Was that all pushed to the side and, trying to just survive, or was there some sort of creative thing that you kind of latched onto that helped carry you through everything? Or was it oh, my partner and my dog and some hikes?
Definitely my wife and I definitely did some hikes for sure, which is not a bad thing. There's some great hiking out here. Um, yeah, I mean, there are a couple of things. I really struggled to write earlier on in the pandemic, and then I started writing a bit more last fall and was still really rusty come spring. And then honestly, this summer, I was so bogged down with the school year, and that was so hard. And then it ended, and summer things started opening up, and it's like I had this backlog of music in me or something. Like I wrote over an hour of music this summer and recorded all the vocals for this album that will be coming out the coming year with Latitude 49 of songs
nice.
that I've written. And yeah, I wrote like 4 huge pieces. It's just, I didn't anticipate that. It was an immense surprise. And another thing that was, something that was a big kind of light for me along the way was I started an artist collective with some composers and a visual artist called Anticx, Anticx. But you can look us up, anticx.art. And we've only had one show so far, but it's mostly been getting to know each other a lot. So that's me, composer Nina Shaker, who's from Michigan, and Tanner Porter, who also went to the University of Michigan, Inti Figgis Bizueta, Carolina Heredia, who also went to the University of Michigan, and then Xuan is our visual artist. So we've just been, we wanted to create a space together where I personally felt really trapped in, like, obviously trapped with the level of, various lockdowns and things, but I guess lockdown isn't quite the right word, but staying at home, safer at home. But then I was just so sick of my own brain. Like all I did every day was spend time with my own damn brain. And it was like not a good place to be. And so having a place, a space with artists who are really trusted and respected to be able to have conversations or to work toward making art together was really, really valuable for getting myself out of my own damn head and having some fresh perspective. And so we really got that started under COVID, and it's starting to, we're kind of doing a soft launch, we like to call it, working ourselves up to bigger gigs and stuff, but we're trying not to be rushed about it. We're trying to really take our time developing a group sense of maybe identity and purpose. And we all have very, I would say, significantly different aesthetics. So that I like that about it. I like that these are all artists who have a lot of respect for each other, who are capable of radically different things. But that also means that a sense of group identity is a little less obvious, I think, aside from us as humans, which is cool. But we've been making an effort to try to start understanding that a bit more too. Everything from little activities that we do together to just having conversations about recipes. It's just the whole gamut. So that's been really nice, and I'm excited for where that collective will end up in the coming years.
Yeah, that sounds like a great, not obviously great, friendships and community. I just think of when you mentioned being sick of being in, just being alone with your own brain. I had that realization of, I can be social, but I'm not like that person that's, rallying the troops to go out to a nightclub or just immediately seeking a room full of people. And this, this is pre-pandemic. And, but I realized that there had to be a counterbalance of all right, I can't just, marinate in like my own circular thought patterns and then like
Yeah.
not pour this energy that's just going into spinning into something a little bit more constructive or supportive. And it started simple with like just finding people who wanted to go on walks and starting with literal first steps of like what's it like getting having an hour of time that's not thinking about work or thinking about the millions of things we all have to do as professional musicians of the pre-planning, how far out can we look realistically with what the environment is, and or even in a setting like where you're teaching, there's still like okay, are we going back to in person? What is it like? Is it going to be hybrid? What are we how do I plan? Do I plan on seeing people? Do I plan on a computer? Like it's nice to kind of I've been feeling like it's been nice to return to sort of a basic understanding of self and what I want to what's I've been telling a lot of people, like, what's my default setting? Like when the world is in chaos and I'm stuck in my room, like what is my default setting? Is it a good place or a place that needs healing from something, or progress in the right direction? And thinking of your group too, like my bandmates in Earth Radio, we were able to carve out some time to record a new single this year. We're going into the studio next week to work on new music, and they've been a lot of the people I've seen over the last year, just the growth of everybody, the mutual support of each other and the art we're trying to make. It was nice to kind of have those smaller spaces and smaller friend groups to really kind of emphasize, like, oh yeah, these people all want to support, they want to cultivate healthy relationships and we can tackle the craziness of the world without feeling like we're just stuck in a corner.
Yeah, and even as I'm an introvert. I don't know about yourself. Yeah,
I'd say more introvert.
a lot. I think a lot of us who are, honestly, I think a lot of musicians are introverts, which is interesting. But especially composers and those compositionally inclined tend to be introverts. And you think, oh, lockdown, no problem. Like I'll. Like, great, like I don't have to go out
stay
now.
home, it's awesome.
Yeah, but then you start to realize it's I feel like so much of my sense of self comes from my community, and being alone I started to lose that. And of course also part of my sense of self was like making music and I wasn't doing that. But it was not only was I not able to really engage with my musical community, I also I had moved under COVID to a new place. So like I wasn't, even if I could, go out for a walk with someone, I was in a new place. I didn't know anyone. So I think that was a big part of the collective for me too. Like I need my people and I need them now. Right. So we'll find a way. And it sounds like you had a similar kind of, thing that you did with your walks and stuff, so that's really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely been it's been nice to last year was kind of a to just blanket term, it was just a crazy time. To be able to come into this year, I just turned 29, so I'm in that mode of like not necessarily like, like, oh, my 30s, wow, what's going to happen when I turn 30? It's more like, all right, let's reflect on my 20s. I have come a long way. I have done a lot of stuff. I've put in a lot of time and effort. And now I can keep building, but I need to set myself up better for, the future. Especially since last year was like, in terms of health wise, it was like, oh, I was like over 300 pounds. I had, just a lot of time, just not, even just moving. It was a lot of just sitting and just stewing and like, all right, I'm just gonna shut out the world with some video games or this movie or this pizza or whatever comes into my sphere. And now that it's, I feel like with each step towards thinking about me, which is really hard to do when you're kind of a people pleaser type and you're just trying to like accommodate everyone else and like, oh yeah, I can play 7 genres and 3 instruments and record and video and edit and write, like I feel like the initial ball that got it rolling was I invested, I'm coming up on a year having my own office at Third Coast Recording Company, which, is that next better step of like, oh, I know how to manage my finances because I can afford 2 rents and, whatever else comes through. And then, in December is when I launched the Patreon and started podcasting and taking that step of like, I've been wanting to podcast for years. And I just, never thought like, I thought like, oh, I have to get like a fancy setup or, I need all the best equipment before I can start. And it's like, nah, I literally can like, this webcam you could buy at Best Buy and this mic is better than like a really cheap USB mic, but it's, it started, those little steps forward of being like, oh yeah, if I just invest time and energy into me, that only helps. Like I haven't had caffeine in a couple months and I still have so much energy.
Yeah.
Which, I was that person that's like, oh yeah, I need, the counterbalance. I have that, the alcohol at the gig and then I need the coffee the next morning. And, years of that just up and down, having, a couple months where it's like, there's just nothing. It's like, oh yeah, I do have like, I have more energy because I've invested more time in what I want to do. And then that translates to the thing that I'm already good at, which is working with and for other people.
Totally.
So yeah, it's been, it's weird to be like more introverted, which you would think comes with like, I don't know, like I feel like introverts are, there's the perception that it's like, oh, we're just these, shy, out of the way people, like, don't look at me, I'll just stay in my little corner. And you would think that also comes with like a sense of like knowing yourself a little better, I think, because so much of it is reactionary to like, oh, there's a ton of people, I need to withdraw from this amount of energy. When for me it was like, just realizing, oh, I tend to think outward and a lot of my stressors come from not setting myself up to be able to address the little fires of like, oh, let's make sure we edit that or this comes out on time, or the the bigger fires of like, my car's broken, how do I fix this? So that's been an interesting journey over the last year, being more confident that I'm a person who's very capable and can make these changes.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. And I've seen some photos with you from I guess you living in Colorado, just the insanity of fires and other things. I'm sure that's been interesting to have to deal with.
Yeah, it was a big adjustment when we first moved out here. Our first September, there was a point where there were 3 really big fires all in the area, and at one point we could actually see flames from our back deck. Just really terrifying. And there was one night where my parents live about an hour away, and they came here to essentially evacuate their house from a different fire. And then a new fire started here, and we could see flames from our deck. And so we had all our bags packed, and someone got up every few hours to check the fire reports, and it was, you know, it's all new to me coming from, I've pretty much only lived in pretty wet places,
Yeah.
like the Midwest or New Jersey, Pittsburgh and Scotland are places I've lived. Like they're very rainy places. So
Yeah.
Colorado is inherently much more. It's like high plains, desert, and then the mountains get more precipitation, but it's still really dry, and it's much drier than it used to be because of climate change. And yeah, so that was, you know, we had the pandemic raging, and then global warming being shoved in our faces, and then I was like, I remember so many times just trying to, like, I was looking at my manuscript and I'd write a note down, and I'd look at that note and I think, what the heck do you think I'm doing with this goddamn little note? Like, why does it matter? Why does this, like, my sense of purpose was really lost in that context. It you know, and I think I found that again. I feel like I got my mojo back, but I think that, you know, obviously the pandemic is a lot to stomach and a lot to understand, and so much grief to process, and that it just feels like the world is falling apart, and then to watch it literally burn before your eyes definitely, I think, added another level of that. And then then this past spring there's a mass shooting at the grocery store
Oh, right.
that a lot of my students go to. A lot of my students shop there, and a number of my colleagues. And like, man, it really felt like it happened while I was getting my first vaccination shot. And
Wow.
I was like so excited and so happy. And I sat down, you know, they make you wait like 15 minutes so they know you don't have this allergic reaction.
Right.
So I was sitting there waiting, and I went on Twitter, and it hadn't even hit any of the news sources yet. It was just like local trending stuff. And I was like, Jesus Christ, like I was happy for 30 seconds. Felt like there was hope for 30 seconds getting the shot. And then this happens. And I was like less than a mile away from where I was at that time.
Wow.
And you could hear the sirens going. Yeah, so it, you know, that really takes you down.
Yeah.
And it really makes you feel like your art doesn't matter, so why even bother? You know, that's not, in retrospect, that's a very kind of ridiculous thing to think, like your art can still matter and help people. And I really do believe that music has, I mean, it can be a force for tremendous good. It can also be a force for bad. You know, it's just a force, and you know, It depends on how you use it, how you shape the world. And I hope that the way I'm using it, I'm certainly trying to advocate for a lot of things through my music. I don't just, not that abstract, there's nothing wrong with abstract music either, but like a lot of my music is pretty tightly wound up in politics or addressing sexism and homophobia. And so it's not like I'm sitting around saying nothing either, but I had to tap back into that purpose, that sense of purpose. So anyway, yeah, you asked about fires, and I got back to sense of purpose again.
No, that's fine. I definitely resonated. I laughed when you mentioned like you writing that note and you're like, why does any of this matter? The world's in chaos. Like,
Yeah.
I definitely had those moments of like, you know, just trying, you know, like writing an album review for a friend and like, you know, enjoying the album, but then, you know, like trying to, you know, think of words and, you know, typing things up and just being like, man, like there's so many issues with the world that are just this constant storm of like, you know, like how does it one individual or one community like stand against that? And it's definitely like made me appreciate the people who are not just like they're not just hanging out because it's fun to be in certain spaces, which can be fun, but the people who really are thoughtful and constructive with, like, even if it's not art, just the way that they interact with the world and the environment, and investing more time into those people has been super rewarding, to just get those little boosts of, like, oh yeah, humanity can be great. It's not just yelling and talking heads and politics and all that.
Yeah, it's true. And that's that alone is reason to make music, right? Just to be reminded that we're all human and we can feel things together.
Yeah, I think about the strange juxtaposition at a festival I went to, with my group Earth Radio, and it's the majority of the crowd was typical Michigan, hippie fest, tiny fest, like, oh, it's in the woods, and people are just hanging out, and you see a lot of the same, like, oh yeah, dreads and the the all the hippie attire, and you're like, okay, these people are all chill and just relaxing. And then mixed into that was some of the locals, which driving up to weddings has been an interesting exercise in observing Michigan's landscape during this time, because I had some weddings last year, and you're playing at, like, the inn at the bay, at the harbor, by the shore, next to the palace, at the vineyard by the by the water, because everywhere's got water. And you're kind of mentally preparing for that. It's like, okay, I'm not a server, I'm the keyboard player, please I'm not taking your cup. And that kind of vibe. And then driving through all the rural areas, and you start to see the pockets of, like, it's not just the politics, but even just, like, I saw signs for, like, QAnon, and, like, people rolling around with Confederate flags, and people in anti-vax shirts, and they were all at this same festival, mixed among the hippies, and then the people who, like, have been taking social responsibility seriously, and just having this weird intersection of, like, like, we all fall into the category of human, and I'm glad that everyone was able to experience some version of art and a festival, but just the differences are kind of striking between, like, the city centers and I guess in most places, city centers versus rural, rural versus, like, the lakeshore, like, it's so strange and I feel like a lot of those, because of the quarantines, you started to see a lot of community pride taking different forms, whether it was, like, the people helped and support each other, or this town is a militia now. Like, it's just so interesting to see, like, that everyone had the shared experience of this, and this ongoing pandemic, and the means of surviving through it have been drastically different from person to person. And
it's true.
It's hard to address all of that. You feel like it's impossible to address all of that with, like, playing Piano Man at a wedding.
Of course. Yeah, definitely. But at the same time, getting to make music for other people, maybe it's not going to solve the world, but it's going to make a few people a little less asshole-ish, which is a good thing.
Yeah, it's definitely the slow drip of, like, spreading, positive of affirmations and messaging and inspiring change and growth. That's definitely all you can hope for. And I think movies, or I don't know, maybe certain media in general, just makes music. I'm thinking of weddings. Everyone picks their songs for a wedding, and sometimes it's just like, oh yeah, we both saw this band together and that's how we met, or oh, we love this artist got us through the first 3 years of our marriage when this was happening, and then other times it's like, they want it to be a movie and they want the perfect like backdrop, and it doesn't really matter what song as long as it's, got a piano and a cello in it.
Yeah. Totally.
Which, I joke semi-cynically about it in an attempt for me to process things, but also to, there's the underlying hope that audiences and the general public can come together around, impactful shared artistic experiences, instead of just, I don't know, looking for selfies at a Beyonce concert. Which Beyonce is great, but I'm not gonna.
No hate to Beyonce for sure.
I'm not gonna spend the whole time taking selfies. Although when I went and saw Mark Rebier, I don't know if you've followed him at all. He has the nickname Loop Daddy.
Okay.
He's such an interesting story in terms of like, he was, dropped out of college, did jobs here and there, was a telemarketer for a couple years prior to his music career taking off. And he had this residency at a bar, kind of like a contemporary brewing company vibe bar restaurant. And he would do like 4 hours of just completely like improvised, comedic, musical, crowd interactive stuff. And it felt like if you took like just the kind of collective id of a room and then made it into songs, like those were kind of how he built tunes. Like he's not trying to freestyle in a way that's like, oh man, that was the flow and it was so hip. And it was just, he's got a loop station and contact in main stage, and then a MIDI controller and a mic. And he since then has made a career doing these, like when I went and saw him, it's almost like it's like he takes I made the comment of like the artist gives permission to the audience to feel. And Mark Rebier does a really good job of like he just walked into the room, was like, like, hey, or no, everyone's cheering, and then he's like, what do you want? And like immediately, comedic. And and then he puts the mic in front of two different people in the front row, and one girl's like, it's my birthday, I'm a bad bitch, like just having a party. And then the next person was like, oh, I'm just here for the loops. And then he's like, well, you're both getting that. And then he walks over and like makes a loop from what the woman said, and then like gets the party started, gets 10 people on stage. They're all kind of like, it's like he's facilitating simultaneously like people's need to be entertained, some people's need to like feel like a star for a second, getting them on and off stage, the viral quote unquote moments that he's kind of been known for, where he'll do 2 hours of improvised music, and then he'll clip out like a song that really like resonated, and that becomes a tune that people can reference. But I thought about like, the fact that he just runs purely on like his own talents and charisma, and then just reading every room, like, just trying to take in the totality of a space. And he's very, I'm trying to remember exactly why I brought him up, but I think just in general, the idea that like he comes from a place of not planning, and there's excitement in that, and then there's fulfillment in that of like going into a space not necessarily unprepared, but just not thinking like, all right, I'm going to open with this and then I'll do that. He's very dynamic, and it was a reminder of like, people want to they want to it was a reminder, like, people want to see shows and they want to interact with artists and they want to have music, because he sold out the Royal Oak in Detroit, and it was that reminder of, like, oh yeah, I'm not just making music for me and a handful of friends. It's contributing to a larger body of work that a community is putting forward, and hopefully motivating younger generations to pick up instruments and older musicians to learn new things. They might have hit a plateau, and now they're like learning about new things and interacting with new people. Yeah, it's been an interesting cool counterweight to last year to see people out in spaces.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's cool. I like that element of kind of communal music making. I think that's really important.
Yeah. And I'm curious with, like, because I always wonder how composers exist in the sense of, like, everyone who writes music can kind of use that term loosely. Obviously at your level, there's years of trying and doing and experiencing different things, and I guess with the teaching job, it helps kind of have some sort of stability to, like, build off of. But what is it like being a composer? Is it like seeking out players all the time, or is it seeing the group you like and just writing for them? Or I feel like there's a lot of options.
I think a lot of people approach it kind of differently. I'm in kind of a very stuffy, old-fashioned aspect of the notion of composing, which is like I'm a classical concert music composer, and I work with primarily classical musicians, not always, but often. And everything that I write is on a commission basis. So it wasn't always this way, but I'm at a point in my career where, for the most part, people approach me about projects. I'd say 90% of the projects I do were initiated by the performer or by an organization. And so they say, hey, we have this idea for a piece, what do you think? And oftentimes I think, not so sure, but hey, what about this other idea? And a lot of times that leads to a really cool discussion, and we end up doing something entirely different, but like that we're both really excited about. So for instance, Michigan-based group, Acropolis Reed Quintet, approached me a few years ago about writing a piece for them. And they really wanted to do something about businesses, small businesses in Detroit. And I said, okay, that's cool, but like I've never lived in Detroit, so I don't have I feel a little awkward or not really a valid perspective writing about businesses in Detroit. And also, what is a Reed Quintet supposed to say about small businesses? And like, we should get electronics involved. And they were like, no electronics. And then the pandemic hit, and they wrote back, and they're like, yes, electronics, good idea. We're totally tech savvy, we want to make this happen. And so we hatched this idea. We went back and forth. We had like all these meetings, and I looped in a filmmaker, which is a visual artist from my collective. I should say multimedia artist from my collective, Swan, and had all these discussions. And then we ended up interviewing small business owners from a bunch of different places across the US. Like Swan interviewed her mother, who's a wig maker in North Carolina, and I interviewed my uncle, who's a farmer in Kansas. We interviewed the owner of a really wonderful business out here in Colorado that specializes in basically all sorts of different types of care for the LGBTQ plus community. And then we also interviewed 3 small businesses in Detroit, business owners. And that became a tapestry piece. I took the audio from the interviews and I created this like a little bit of a narrative, but kind of not. There are a lot of common themes from people who had never met each other, or totally opposite perspectives that I would juxtapose, or like there was this really beautiful moment in the interview with Schwann's mother talking about her immigration experience and the why she created her business and how that affected her life and her family. And then I had this clip of my uncle talking about all the ancestors before him who had farmed in Kansas. And so, you know, he was like, my grandfather and his father and this and that was like interpolated with Schwann's mother, Kiki, her perspective. It was almost like they're having a conversation, but the conversation was like saying, oh, like really like almost exact opposite stories, but they really connected in a way. So things like that, it was really fun. And so ultimately we ended up with this like pretty big piece that is electronics and reed quintet that kind of goes through this huge spiral of emotions. It's like a very emotional piece. And that was never the plan for either of us. But that's where we ended up. So I really love that, because often that dialogue ends up getting me to a really cool place. Or I had this phase of my career where everyone was asking me for chamber pieces, instrumental pieces, and all I wanted to do was to, like, it'd been a while since I'd written songs. I'm a vocalist, and I love singing my own music with other people. And so every time someone approached me, I just said, yes, and can I sing on it? And everyone said yes, literally
Wow.
everyone. Yeah, it's great. So I ended up writing all these songs, which led to this song cycle now, which is going to be this album with Latitude 49, which I just got the mixes for, and I'm really excited about it. We did that all remotely, by the way. We were in 6 different locations, 7 people performing 6 different locations, and we managed to do it all remotely. It sounds really good. So like, you know, that was like, I had maybe 5 different ensembles commissioning the songs that ultimately led to this album. So, you know, for me, it's a lot of kind of what are the opportunities being handed to me, and how can I kind of mold those into my dream project. So I'm really excited about everything that I do. And so yeah, that's kind of what my professional career looks like. And then of course I teach, and health insurance is really nice. That kind of security is wonderful. Yeah, so that's my day-to-day life looks radically different on any given day. There's some days where I'm teaching all day long, and then there's some days where I'm writing all day long. There's some days where I'm recording, or days where I'm traveling to go premiere a piece with an ensemble somewhere. You know, and I like that. I like that I have so much of a range. It keeps things interesting in terms of like, no, not another day, or get up and do the same thing, right? It's exhilarating, and I think that oftentimes a lot of people think composers are just like sitting in their rooms trying to come up with things on the piano, and that's maybe like 10% of my time. Right. You know, I spend way more time sending emails.
Yeah.
But don't we all? So yeah, that's kind of a little taste of the slice of life, I guess, for me.
Yeah, I love the idea of, you know, with your project, talking to so many different people of different backgrounds. Mm-hmm. You know, even with this podcast being centered around Michigan musicians, whether they're here currently or otherwise, it's all people I've met in the Michigan music scene, or have been involved in the Michigan music scene for more than just a day. Yeah. And just getting different perspectives of like people who are do booking primarily, or people who are performers or teachers, or just seeing kind of the general like I feel like everyone has that sentiment of like, part of why I like doing art is that it affords a, you know, and it affords like an experience that not a lot of people can say they do, you know,
Yeah.
working a traditional job. You know, it's like if you go to an office job and you know, like, all right, third floor, this cubicle, sit down, clock out, go home.
Yep.
Like very regimented. Like that might be nice in terms of like, oh, I don't really have to think about a lot, but I like, even as volatile as it can get being a full-time artist,
Mhm.
it's way more fun to wake up knowing that wake up the majority of the days knowing like, okay, this day is what I make it. I have
Yeah.
some things that I have scheduled, you know, like a gig or whatever,
Mhm.
but this is a day that isn't defined by somebody else's standards, someone else's expectations entirely.
Yeah.
And just the fun of like, you know, like today I get to be a podcast person, tomorrow I get to be a performer, and you
Yeah.
know, Thursday I get to write about an album. You know,
Mhm.
it's dynamic, and it keeps it forces me to kind of stay on my toes and be, you know, kind of sharpen my skills further, rather than just like, you know, succumbing to the, I don't know, succumbing's a I don't know, not, I guess it's a darker word. I think it's succumbing to the routine, I guess,
Yeah.
of that life can sometimes get you in,
Uh-huh.
um and that can, you know, be great for some people, but
Yeah.
not for me.
Yeah, I hear you. You know, I think that that routine, that sense of routine too, is also part of maybe like this greater kind of societal American dream or something, that this is how you're supposed to live your life. You
Hmm.
clock in, you clock out, you go home to your family, paint your white picket fence a little bit whiter, and
Yep.
like, you know, it's just that I think a lot of musicians don't really subscribe to that. We're the type of people who like to be in control and self-directed and think for ourselves. And I really, you know, that I think that's a wonderful thing. You know, we're more free thinkers, we're more independent, and I think the world could use a little more of that.
Yeah, it's definitely just I feel like there is a shift happening with segments of, you know, at least the American population, from what I could observe, where, you know, if you think of something as broad as like, you know, work life balance, it's people recognizing, you know, like I think of the argument right now of like, some people are like, oh, nobody wants to work, everyone just wants to stay home and not
Yeah.
do anything, whereas the people who aren't, you know, working some of these service industry jobs, they finally have the courage and self-worth to like make that leap and like go into somewhere they might be more happy or more successful or
Hmm.
more creative, you know, people taking ownership of the fact that, you know, life isn't just like, you know, life shouldn't just be like, yeah, I'm at the Amazon warehouse and then I
Hmm.
go to my friend's cottage and eventually I'll have a cottage and then that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, seeing the current generation of millennials and um, what's one younger, Gen Z, is that it?
Yeah.
Um, like people aren't settling for those shitty jobs anymore. Like, and that's why there's like this, you know, that there's this hurting aspect of the service industry. Like people can't get employees. It's like, well, you don't pay them well and treat them like crap. And you know, they're starting to realize, like, wait a minute, I didn't ever have to put up with that. And life might be hard and scary to try to find a different way, but like, sure as hell not going back there. And you know, I've worked in the service industry. It was the most stressful and difficult phase of my life. And it, you know, everyone kind of, I feel like there's this uh, I don't know, these white collar workers who look down on people in the service industry and stuff. And I think, man, your job is so much easier than your servers. Like,
Yep.
you know, it's so much easier. I don't care what you do. I guarantee you it's easier than trying to tend for 10 tables of assholes, like at the same time. And musicians exist so much, like so many musicians supplement their income in the service industry. And it's really, a financially challenging time. And I really hope that as these younger generations, and that includes my generation, millennials, realize what BS the system is and how poorly they've treated us. I hope that there's this critical mass that just insists on something better. And I think it's starting to happen. I hope it continues.
Yeah, and I hope the trend continues, and just I think of like sometimes I feel like a lot of people they whether or not they think they're patient, they put up with a lot of stuff, or they make excuses for a lot of things instead of and maybe it comes from from a place of like, it's like, oh, who am I to question this? I'm just the cashier at this place, or I'm just the but to like, I think a lot of what I've heard of arguments from the owner class, the people owning the businesses, the people who are buying up properties and being landlords, the sentiment feels like, oh, they're upset because they don't want to return to the working class, and they don't want to be in a position that could potentially be the same place that they put their employees, or worse. And the fear of returning to the worker class has been a lot of problems with tied into the American dream, and like all kind of stemming from like post-war economic boom, earlier 20th century, and the whole suburbia, like everyone gets a house, the picket fence and 2.5 kids and a dog.
Totally.
It's interesting to have, I think of like with the owner class, the venue managers. I've definitely heard a lot more conversations from artists who are more unafraid to kind of speak truth to how a venue's operating, instead of just gritting their teeth and taking a gig. They're telling their friends like, no, these guys routinely, not only do they underpay, they demean artists through the door, and we're sonic furniture to them, and they just want to put us in the corner and have people put their feet up on our gear, and and it's been an interesting shift to see people who have weathered the storm. They've come out of it with a perspective of like growth and determination, rather than just purely being defeated. And even those who pivoted to other jobs out of necessity, they are now, I've seen people who've they took seasonal work, or they took remote work. They're using that to inform getting back into art full time. And it's been cool to see that kind of growth on a community basis.
Amen. I hope that people have taken this time to reflect, and they're like, that was messed up the way things were, and we're better than that. And I'm optimistic that we'll see some change. I hope so. I do.
Yeah, as for every like weird client at a wedding, there are 100 people who are doing some, even if it's like, oh, I built a raised bed garden so I could grow vegetables. Like, okay, that's a healthy hobby.
We did that. Our tomato harvest today is ridiculous. So if you need some cherry tomatoes, like send me some.
Just a pile of cherry tomatoes.
No, seriously, it's like we have like a bushel of cherry tomatoes. What do you do with that many teeny tiny tomatoes? I don't even know. I gotta figure it out. Anyway.
Maybe my first thought was pasta sauce, but I don't know if those are the right tomatoes.
No, we do have some larger tomatoes. That's the cherry tomatoes that are just taken off. So like, that's pasta sauce tends to be the larger guys.
So you get like 1,000 cherry tomatoes for one pot of.
Yeah. We got that. We can make that happen. It'd be a lot of seeds.
Yeah. Maybe, I don't know. I can't remember what it's called now. The like bruschetta. Like,
yep. No, we're doing a ton of that. I promise you.
Yeah. We cannot stem the tide of more tomatoes, but we could make a bunch of bruschetta.
We can make, instead of lemonade out of lemons, it's like bruschetta out of a crap ton of cherry tomatoes.
Yeah, I helped the singer in my band. She lives down the street from me, and her and her partner and her dad needed an extra, helping hand to shovel dirt and like get things positioned for their raised bed garden, and now I just get cucumbers all the time. So
nice, that's good. We have a zucchini cucumber exchange with our next door neighbor because he's just got too many cucumbers and we have too many zucchinis. So it's a good deal. See, communal power, right? Like we each specialize in a few crops and we can, have our own little gardening collective or something.
Yeah, I think about the I don't know if you know he's like a comedian who's known for his like video editing work, another like introverted person with social anxiety that kind of Vic Berger is his name. He works with like Tim and Eric, and that can get to that level of crazy for comedy, but he makes these edits for his own personal channel and then for Vice News and other outlets, and they're all like these hilarious super cuts of like the latest one he put out was just titled like "Are we in the end times?" and he highlighted like the through line narrative of like Reaganism, self-reliance, all the way up through like the talking head, whether it's a religious person, a political pundit, like the through line of self-reliance leading into like doomsday prepping, and how it turned into like you need to be prepared so that anytime someone comes up, you like it turned into that folksy wisdom from Reagan in a cowboy hat to people being like everyone's coming to kill you, it's all gonna happen, and the best way to be prepared is tighten meal plans, and they're selling like buckets of prepared meals and just like freeze dried turkey,
yum,
a gallon bucket. But yeah, to think self-reliance turned into like it turned from a just like a term that yes, it's been tied to the American dream, I guess, but the idea that like self-reliance is now kind of an innate fear of other, whether it's like your neighbor or the government or whatever you make to be the boogeyman, like self-reliance turned into doomsday prepping versus like self-reliance could also mean like you surround yourself with the community that can support one another, but then you're also able to live independently. Like yes, you're producing your own crops, but then you can trade those crops. Like that's a way better way to survive. Like I know the people I meet, I always keep track of like, all right, they're a dentist, like they're like, I keep an idea of who I can hit up with questions, or you just provide a service to in exchange for a service. Like it's and I don't know if it just comes from always being in like a lower economic tier, but I think it's also from just enjoying those seeing those people that are like, yeah, that person's they're a baker and they make awesome bread, and every now and again I get a loaf of bread and it's great. But yeah, having bread. Community is great, and bread.
Love bread, love community, cucumbers, zucchinis, all of the above, all good things.
All the good things. Yeah. That just got me thinking of, I don't know if you're even still doing it. I just remember you used to you were trying super hard on the like zero waste thing. I don't know. Did you, was that you who wrote something about the experience on like an article or something? Like, I don't know if it was on your website, but
I think it did. It's been a while. Well, so
yeah, like a few
I did
years,
that for like a year, and then my now wife and I moved in together, and she had a dog, and then we got another dog, and like animals create waste. So like we definitely still try to minimize and just really conscientious about where you're buying your food, and do you need to buy it in packaging, or are there other ways to buy your food and obtain that? And so I did zero waste for about a year, and then now I'm more of like a minimize in a slightly less rigorous way, I guess you could say. But yeah, I mean, it's really empowering to do that. But ultimately, yes, it's important that we cut down on waste and stop buying, cut down on the demand for products and excessive packaging. But it's also, the fault isn't ours, it's the corporations,
yeah.
And, if a critical mass of people is not supporting certain types of packaging, then the corporations will change. But it would be great if they just like did that without being pressured, like just did the right thing. It's like there's this political cartoon that's been written decades ago, and there's some like climate conference, and someone gets up and says, but what if we make the world a better place for no reason?
Just getting booed. Boo.
Yeah, which is honestly, I feel like, well, you can't prove climate change is real. You can't prove that this is bad for the environment. I'm like, one, we can, but two, even if we couldn't, like, I'm so sorry, I made the world a better place.
Turns out it's great when you don't throw, tiny plastic into the ocean.
Yeah, turns out that's a really good thing to not do. Who'd have thunk it? Didn't see that coming.
Yeah, because I even think of like, I try to, like, yes, it definitely is, what was it, like certain, I forget was it if you shut down, there was like, if you shut down even a fraction of the percentage of like corporate pollution, it was like taking every car in Europe off the street, or some metric to compare.
Totally.
And I think about my thing, like, I try not to waste, things that are gonna, end up sitting in a landfill forever. And, recycling can be tricky with, with roommates. Just like, making sure like, hey, rinse out this container, because like down the pipeline, it's not going to get sorted. It might not get thrown away. It'll, end up in a bin that then gets pressed to do a cube, and then the cube gets contaminated, and then a company doesn't buy it, and then that cube goes into the landfill. And now there's a ton of plastic just sitting in a landfill in a cube. Or however, big they compress all the recyclables. But yeah, it goes back to like there's so many things, like what can rinsing out one container of sauce do for the impact? But if we all did it,
still do it, it's not a reason not to do it. But yeah, it's climate change isn't like our individual faults. It is like the collective system's fault, which is run by corporations. So that is, a very small number of people, in fact, who are more explicitly at fault.
Yeah. And well, and I'm sure with your zero waste experience, if it taught anything, it was like, you now have those thought patterns to like, even though you're not like so pared down, like living nomadically with like, I don't know, 50 mason jars full of various things. um, you can take those principles and kind of apply them to different areas
Mhm.
of living, rather than just, default like, oh, this is how I grew up, I'll just
Yeah,
keep doing that.
right. It's almost like we can learn and get better and make the world a better place through self-reflection. It's almost like that's a thing.
Yeah, but how will I make all of the money though?
We can't. We're millennials.
Yeah.
That system's not going to work for us.
Yeah, and I've been loving those housing market memes that have just been
Oh my God.
the people, the squiggly drawn dude with the stick being like, come on, crash. I want to buy a house.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was hearing
Relatable.
my friend's journey of trying to buy a house with her partner, and they like I think they were looking at a house that was like 90,000, and within 2 days of asking about it, it sold for 130,000. And they were like, oh well, we hadn't even gotten to the point of like, let's figure out how to get a loan and let's make an
Mm,
offer. And they were just like, you know some dude probably from Chicago came up and saw that opportunity to spend a fraction of his income on a
mhm.
house, and you know keep the same income earnings. I watched a Vice News thing just because I don't know, it's been popping up here and there, about the I think it was in Gunnison where my friend lives, talking about like couples, or at least this couple they examined, moving over from California to find a
Yeah.
place that was like way cheaper, but they still got to keep the normal job that made, like comparatively, like, oh, this job is now a higher earning job in this area, so we can
Yeah.
have, a better quality of life, even though we're kind of, scooping up available property for the immediate community.
Mhm.
And just kind of the reckoning of like, yeah, it's like we have a problem with homelessness, but we also have a problem with the housing market, and we just have problems.
A lot of problems. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it's the zero waste thing got me. I follow this dude, Matt Diavella, who he made the two minimalism documentaries on Netflix.
Oh yeah. Mhm.
And some things were cool in that. Some of them was like, I don't know if I could do that. I mean, literally, if you just look at what's behind me, it's like I have, who needs all these posters and game systems and a
Yeah.
bed. Just sleep on a mat in the dirt,
Yeah.
and greet the morning, and that's your nourishment.
Yeah. It also turns out though that I really like having a bed. So,
Yeah.
but there's a lot to be gained from that. Our society is so fixated on, just a ridiculous level of opulence, honestly, that we just don't need. And it's not a good thing for the environment where, you know, uh, oftentimes are just well-being. Surplus is not a good thing. So yeah, I I think that I've taken a lot of more abstract lessons from zero waste as well, as opposed to just like specific actions that I can do. It's also more of, I think, yeah, getting into a minimalist mindset or questioning the way things have always been done, um, which is a healthy thing to do, I think.
Yeah, it's the only way that yeah, society's going to progress is just
Mm-hmm.
examining what's been happening, and then seeing what impactful changes. I feel like a lot of progressives in this country talk a lot about different European models of everything from like addiction treatment to housing to tackling homelessness. I think it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't Finland who just reduced their homeless population to like under 2,000.
Oh,
And I was like,
cool.
what? That's
Turns out all you have to do to make the homeless population dwindle is give them homes. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's wild how that works. If you actually like house people, then they're not homeless. Who'd have thunk it?
Who would have thought that? And like compare that to like one measure I've seen with Los Angeles is they're making these kind of like urban tiny home communities.
Yeah.
And the way they're structured, though, it's like it feels like a little prison because it's got like the barbed wire fencing and a security guard. And it's not like, oh, it's a gated community. It's more like, no, we're going to like get out of here. Go away. We want to build a
hide from society. Yeah. That's not the way to do it.
Yeah. It's because, it's more complex of an issue than like, oh, homeless people want to be homeless. Is like, what? Who who said that? They didn't start homeless.
Did you think about asking anyone who was homeless what they thought? Probably not. It's communication. That's a big thing. That, and I think art is a good facilitator of communication in that way, of being able to kind of transcend people's expectations of a dialogue and like kind of hitting them in different emotions, thinking about it differently. They're not walking in and only just seeing a cover song and that's their only form of art. I think more people are hopefully going to seek out different experiences after having kind of the same experience last year, the same routines and survival patterns and all that. I hope so too.
Yeah. Well, this has been great catching up and
it's so great to chat. It's been a long time, but hopefully not so long until the next one.
Yes, I definitely want to spend more time. Like I've not just traveling, but I have the idea of, since I've been doing this podcast on Zoom, like to have future episodes be on location or having people come to like a more filled out studio space, having those options added. Because it'd be way more fun to like dip into an area for a weekend, hang out with people in that area, do a string of interviews and then trickle that out here and there.
Totally.
It's just as with all things artistic and creative, the model is everywhere. It's not a ladder. It's a an MC Escher staircase into a wormhole. Like it could just go. You could start in one spot and then you end up in a completely, like Mark Rebier. You start making goofy songs in a Dallas bar, and then suddenly you're doing a live stream on a very popular podcast with Flying Lotus and Reggie Watts. Like you never know.
Like you do.
Yeah. Where should people find? I think you have a website and some other stuff floating around on the internet. Where should people find that?
Website is great. You have to spell my last name. I'm sorry, but it's aksocolofsky.com. Maybe you can link to it or something for people so they don't have to spell that. Website's great. You can find me on YouTube. I have a number of videos up of performances, SoundCloud, and Spotify.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I know this episode will go up on Friday, so it'll be a quick turnaround.
Yeah, that's beauty.
Yeah, and hopefully, within the next year, I can make a trip out there and just pass through and see.
Yeah, let me know if you're ever in the area. I think I'll be in Michigan at some point when I come in here.
Oh, cool.
With my work with the Acropolis.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thanks for sitting down and chatting and catching up. It's always fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I might go take a nap and try to get over this jet lag. I'm struggling.
Well, cool. Cool. Yeah. Enjoy your nap, and I'm sure we'll talk sooner than later.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Dutcher. Great to do this. This
No
was
problem.
fun. Yeah.
Well, that was fun. It's always nice catching up with Annika Socolofsky. She's such a wonderful voice in the contemporary classical music space, and as you can tell, she has a lot of intention behind her art, and a lot of thinking that goes into how she structures her life around all the different groups she works with and the people she teaches and collaborates with. It's really fun, and it was it'd been like 5 years since I've chatted with her for more than a few messages on social media. So thanks for listening, and again, if you want to support the podcasts directly, the easy versions are liking, subscribing, following, whatever platform you happen to be listening or watching this podcast on. Feel free to support there. Also, leave a comment. Tell me something you thought was nice, something you learned, something you enjoyed. And you can also support by going to patreon.com/DutcherSnedeker. There you'll get early access to all of the podcast episodes, and you'll get other perks and merch and fun stuff. And DutcherSnedeker.com for everything else. But we'll see you next week for another episode of Mitten Backstage. Take care.